everybody, and welcome to today's video. I have just finished writing a review for a game called Dry Drowning, and I wanted to talk about something that has been rolling around in my head ever since I started to write that review. See, I absolutely love Dry Drowning, and you can check out my review on digitallydownloaded.net for my full and in-depth thoughts as to why. But it is a game that I very nearly missed playing at all, because a lot of the conversations around it were, I feel anyway, unfairly limiting towards it, and it has to do with the way that we talk about genre in games. So that's the point of this video. We as an industry have a very specific way of talking about video games, and it is centered around how the game plays. In other words, we define genres in games by their structure. A platformer is a platformer because you jump from place to place, collecting things and challenging yourself with the precision in which you do so. A RPG is an RPG because the whole mess of qualities that make the genre what it is are what we define each game within it by. A visual novel is a visual novel because it is a game more focused on reading and narrative than interactivity, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of genres in video games. Now, Dry Drowning first came out in 2019 on PC, and then a couple of weeks later on Nintendo Switch. The aggregate of reviews haven't been that positive, and one of the reasons that I did largely ignore it, at least until a code landed in my inbox and I figured I may as well give it a go anyway, was that most of the reviews were labeling it as a visual novel and a little more. I play a lot of visual novels that have a lot better art than Dry Drowning, to be frank, so it became a very easy game to miss and overlook. The problem is that it's not really a visual novel at all. It's a noir thriller in the vein of Raymond Chandler, with some science fiction and dark cyberpunk elements to it. If the reviews had led with and focus on that, I would have been much more interested in playing it pretty much straight away, and I would have picked it up on PC, even though I don't play PC games that often, because that is absolutely my kind of narrative experience that I enjoy. And that brings me to my point here. The way that we categorize every other art form has to do in its entirety on aesthetics and theme. In literature, for example, books are typically classified according to their theme. They may be horror, fantasy, crime fiction, or perhaps something like historical fiction. There are a couple that I would call structural genres, such as youth fiction and children's books, but generally, even under those umbrellas, we quickly return to defining the books by their thematic genre. So it may well be an example of a youth fiction that you pick up off the shelf, but it's also considered fantasy, and so on. It's the same situation in cinema, with the exception of the structural genres like blockbuster or independent film or foreign film, which are generally only used to contextualize the film against its commercial potential. We talk about film by thematic genre too. There are superhero films, erotic thrillers, romance, comedy. It goes on and on. The same goes for the visual arts. The surrealists and impressionists worked within those fields for thematic reasons rather than structural. And even music, where genres are structural, doom metal is doom metal rather than rap because of the way that the music is structured, the structure and theme of music is inherently intertwined. Rap's themes come from the way that rap is structured and how it's performed, for example. So why does all of this matter? Why does it matter that we talk about video games as a structural genre rather than thematic genre? It's because when we talk about art, what's important is what the artwork means, not how we experience it, theme rather than structure. We talk about the themes of Wuthering Heights, my all-time favorite book, and we analyze the potency of Heathcliff as a character. What we don't do is tell people whether they should read Wuthering Heights because it's only a short novel. If you don't like short novels, you're not going to like Wuthering Heights. That's a ridiculous thing to say, but that is effectively what you're doing if you're going to compare structural genres. In cinema, we respect Stanley Kubrick as an auteur because of the way that he worked with science fiction or horror or the historical epic. Stanley Kubrick's my favorite director. He worked in a lot of different genres. What we don't do, though, is analyze Kubrick's worth as a filmmaker based on the stock he used. Certainly, the structure of literature and film is critically important, and we do need to talk about it, especially within the circles of the people making the art. But once the artwork's out there in the public and we're talking about it in a more kind of artistic sense, genre exists as a way of defining art, and we don't define any other art form by its structure in preference to its themes. And I'll give you a ridiculous example that's related to Dry Drowning because it's about noir. Imagine if we told people that they shouldn't watch The Big Sleep, which is the amazing noir black and white film that was an adaptation of a Raymond Chandler novel. Imagine if we told people that they shouldn't watch that because it is black and white, just like Birth of a Nation was. The two films aren't related in any way, but if you're talking about structural genre, then they're comparable. And that's why structure doesn't work as a genre, because genre ignores what the artwork is actually about. So again, to get back to why this all matters, as long as we allow ourselves to define games by their structure, we limit our ability to talk about their actual qualities. Narrative-driven games like Dry Drowning deserve thousands of words written about their transgressive qualities, the way that they relate to the tradition of Raymond Chandler, and what science fiction does to that noir aesthetic. The minute we pigeonhole them as visual novels instead, we are reducing them to a game about words that you read. And that really is all that it is about. Anyhow, that is enough for this video. It is a fairly short one, but it was a bit of a mind dump on my part. I do hope that it encourages you to challenge your perceptions on how you think about genre in video games. I do think it is something that is relevant and important to talk about, especially now that games are maturing as an art form and we are starting to take them more seriously as artworks. It's important that we also elevate the way that we just talk about them, and I do think that how we define them, the genres that we put them in, does count towards that conversation. I certainly think that it's important that we understand the structures of games. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but to give you an example from video games that I've thought about more than a couple of times, and it's a good way of, I guess, defining why I would like to see video games go in a different direction. I would much rather see us talk about Blue Reflection as a Magical Girls game, Trails of Cold Steel as an epic, and Final Fantasy VII Remake as a cyberpunk-themed fantasy, than try to compare them all to one another, because currently they're all defined as JRPGs. They're all Japanese RPGs. Therefore, by genre, by the rules of genre, you should be able to compare them. Of course, they're completely incomparable to one another. And we're only going to be able to start judging these games on their merits when we understand that the merits of these video games have very little to do with how they play and everything to do with what they say. And I do think this applies for pretty much every genre that we currently talk about in video games out there. They all say something, and it's important that we frame the discussion of video games around that as the focal point. Anyhow, once again, I've already said that this was enough for one video, but then I decided to say something else. This really is enough for this video. I want to thank you as always for tuning in. I do hope it was interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because this could be an interesting discussion, and I'm always interested to hear what other people think when I start to talk about video games as artworks. So yes, do let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you have enjoyed this video, please do hit that like and subscribe button. The like is good for me. It makes me feel good that I've done a good video. The subscribe means that you won't miss another video that I do in the future, and I do a lot of them, you may have noticed. Please also consider backing me on Patreon if you do enjoy my work. You can do so for $1 a month, or you can spend more if you'd like and feel really generous. That support really does directly help me continue to build what I'm doing with this channel, and I certainly have more ideas that I would like to explore. Finally, if you are a fan of visual novels, and I certainly hope that you are, I do love the genre as such, but if you do enjoy your visual novels, then I do produce some of my own, and you can buy them off itch.io. Links are all in the description below this video, but you can buy them from itch.io, and in doing so you are again directly helping what we are doing with DDNet. So thank you very much as always for tuning in, and we will see you at the next video.